working together, eating together. I'm looking forward to reception. So my task today is a simple one, but a very exciting one. Given the day's events so far and the eclectic nature of the speakers, I can't wait to hear some of these rich narratives that befits a policy forum. But before I go any further, let me do the needful. Your Excellencies, members of the Government of South Africa, Your Excellency, Honorable Minister of Fisheries and the Blue Economy of Madagascar, Dr. Mahatante, on behalf of the Council of Ministers of Fisheries of SADC, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, there are lots of them here, you may not know it, even the fishers are diplomats in many ways, development partners, private sector and civil society, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this policy forum. As Rosanna mentioned, my name is Ahmed Khan. I'm the Chief Fisheries Officer and Blue Economy Coordinator in the Department of Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank Group at the headquarters based in Abidjan. So it's a pleasure to be here. The inspiration for this session actually stemmed from some of the conversations we had during the planning phase. We want to know what the African vision is for the fisheries we want. Given that the bank has prioritized aquatic fisheries under the Blue Economy Flagship, and that there are wicked governance challenges and complex policy processes to navigate, and I think we did talk a lot about those today, especially when it comes to justice, engagement, access, finance. The question then becomes, what could excellence in leadership looks like towards prioritizing aquatic foods, as well as supporting fish value chains for its impact on food and nutritional security, livelihoods and jobs, not to mention cross-border trade. And I was very delighted to see someone mention ACTFA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is one of the bigger visions of the continent. Colleagues, the Feed Africa goals, one of 5 of the high priorities of the bank, are well aligned with the comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program called CADEP under Agenda 2063, which aims to eliminate hunger and reduce poverty by raising economic growth through agriculture-led development, fisheries in this particular context. This particular vision is common to all African governments, and fisheries is not an exception. Today, as we gather here from across the continent, we need to reflect and look at the diversity of resources, natural capital endowment across 6 large marine ecosystems, from the north to the west, to the south, to the east, and several transboundary lakes and rivers, lots of them. Whether we're talking about the Chad, from Central Africa, the Caribbean, Tanganyika, Malawi, Victoria, not to mention the Nile, one of the longest rivers in the world, Congo, Niger, Limpopo, etc. All of these aquatic resources has renewable natural fishery resources that we could tap on if sustained and managed properly. Despite these good stories, the continent is still a high importer of fish with a high import bill. You can imagine how much it costs to import fish when you have it in your backyard. We also have one of the lowest productivity on the continent. Less than 10% of what we produce fits within the global picture, at least what we account for as part of national catch. The continent is plagued by high malnutrition with the lowest consumption of fish across the world, and I'm sure some colleagues will talk about this later on. Half the global average, less than the WTO recommendation of 15 kilograms per capita. We are also seeing increasing huge amount of post-harvest loss, which has become part of the conversation today. limiting or limited financing, especially for small, medium enterprises and smallholder fish farmers and processors, and of course, high rates of illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing with social cost that amounts to billions of dollars. Given these and these eclectic speakers, I'm sure there are multiple entry points for policy reforms, for transformative changes, and for the future we want, for the fisheries we want. This is the goal of this session. I wanted to list some of these, but I think I'll save that. But just for the fun of it, we can think about the ecosystem approach from a conservation standpoint. We can think about community rights to access, blue justice. That's a very good policy entry point to discuss. We can talk about mechanisms for that, diets and nutrition, addressing overfishing, developing competitive value chains, providing input and output infrastructure. That's what the bank does best. Access to finance, environmental safeguards, labor codes, conformity infrastructure and standards, cross-border trade, I mentioned that earlier, social inclusion and gender, viability and livelihood, here, resilience building, to name a few. Of course, we can't leave our centers of excellence, as this is also an academic forum. So the list is long. Hence, we have this panel of experts to give us a flavor of what we can do differently and how we can excel. Here, excellence is the principle, and it's a quality of governance. And I'm sure Sven has a lot to talk about when it comes to quality of governance. So the format is as follows. We're gonna have 3 to 5 minutes from these distinguished speakers. I don't need to introduce them. They are well known in what they do, for who they are, from development financing institutions to NEPAD, to governments, honorable ministers. It's quite a showcase. I'm actually excited. And of course, my brother here, Samoseki, will do the honor to facilitate the Q&A and to provide some concluding remarks. So with that, I'm happy to call upon Mr. Niraj Vij from the African Development Bank. Niraj, please.
Thank you, Ahmed. I think you have actually made my job difficult because a lot of what I was going to say is already said by you. But nevertheless, I think we will do justice when we are here. That's what we are here for. Your Excellencies, members of the Government of South Africa, Your Excellency, Honorable Minister of Fisheries and the Blue Economy of Madagascar, Dr. Mahatante, representatives of the diplomatic corps, development partners, private sector, and civil society, fellow panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to this policy forum. I must say all protocols observed. My name is Niraj Vij and I am the Regional Sector Manager in the Agriculture and Agro-Industry Department at Southern Africa Business Delivery Office of the African Development Bank Group. I'm based out of Pretoria office. As you may all know, the African Development Bank Group is a AAA rated development financial institution, the only one on the continent, and one of the several multilateral development banks aimed at reducing poverty and fostering social progress. The bank is made up of 54 African regional member countries and 27 non-African countries from across the world. This places us in a very strategic position to develop sound and robust policies that are locally appropriate and that meet best practices in terms of delivery. Indeed, leading by example and by excellence is a theme we aspire to as a development bank. We engage on policy reform, support development intervention at multiple scales from local, national, regional, and continental levels. Through our policy dialogue with governments, we formulate country strategy papers, develop regional integration strategy frameworks and priority pillars, and strive to deliver on complex operations. These outcomes could result to investment projects or policy-based operations. In fact, the bank earlier this year approved $1.5 billion facility towards an emergency food production arising from high-level dialogue with presidents and ministers of finance and agriculture to address the impacts of the war in Ukraine on food prices and increasing input costs. And in continuing with this theme, in January, the bank is holding a conference in Dakar, which will lead to setting up of compacts at the national level. The theme of this conference is moving towards food sovereignty for the continent. Again, the idea is to bring all the participants, all the players in this field, including governments, private sector, financial institutions, various ministries, on one platform to address this increasingly challenging issue. Fisheries is not an exception to these policy operations, and small-scale fisheries is a priority in meeting our Feed Africa goals, which is supported by the Blue Economy Flagship that Ahmed coordinates. Feed Africa is one of the 5 priority areas of the bank with 4 main goals: eradicating extreme poverty, addressing malnutrition and malnourishment, supporting competitive value chains, and being a net exporter of agro-commodities. Thus, from these goals, there are multiple entry points for the bank's intervention. At the core of sector operations, we focus on any stage of the fish value chain, harvest, processing, and markets, depending on government priority and stakeholder needs. Beyond the fisheries dimension, we also promote integrated approaches through various leverage points, including diet and nutrition, markets and value chains, special agro-processing zones, cold storage infrastructure, climate financing, livelihood and trade, as well as building resilience. Besides these sector-focused policy-related interventions, we also engage on environmental policy and safeguards, promote fiduciary best practices in terms of procurement and financial audits, gender mainstreaming, climate adaptation, and resilience building. For policy-based operations, we have triggers and policy reform conditions that fulfill our mandate. Our operations cover multiple skill sets and across several departments under a one bank approach. Currently, for the fisheries portfolio, we have more than 30 programs in 45 countries across the continent. Some are currently active and others are in the pipeline. Some of the projects are focused on marine capture small-scale fisheries. Others are on inland fisheries and aquaculture. And some are integrated with water resource management or with agriculture, irrigation, and livestock. A month ago, a team from the bank traveled to Angola and Zambia, speaking with local fishermen, women fish processors, traders, youth, as well as community leaders and district councillors. They heard how the bank finance projects are transforming lives. The cooperative leaders shared with the team how the lives of the members of the cooperative have been made better, household income and savings have increased, children are better nourished, with variety of fish products, standards of living have improved through better housing conditions. This story highlights the importance of small-scale fisheries and aquaculture, common voices across the continent. That speaks to how small-scale fisheries are too big to ignore. In conclusion, fellow panelists and distinguished participants, I would like to conclude by congratulating TBTI Network for hosting this Congress for the first time in Africa, and for providing us with an opportunity to partake in this particular session. We look forward to a rich policy dialogue and exploring innovative financing mechanisms, as well as technical assistance opportunities to support local communities. I thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is someone who most of us know. He doesn't need an introduction. Mr. Honorable Minister.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, honorable colleagues, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a great honor, and I'm feeling very humbled to stand in front of you this evening to address this very august assembly. And why? Just because I have learned many things since this morning. And the resilience that you are showing is the image that we should also give to the fishing community. Just because if we are still standing here up to now, just because we are very well fed and we are so far still feeling comfortable. Am I right?
Absolutely.
So that is exactly the image that we need to transfer, we need to give to the fishing community. So when you talk about policy, and then we have in mind that we have a lot of issues that we need to address. And for us to address these issues, we need legal frameworks. And when we need legal frameworks, and that means that we need to gather information, and we need to establish a list of solutions. So for the case of Madagascar, we have, let's say, aligned all of the policies and strategies to develop the blue economy. So for this, we referred, of course, to the international documents such as like the SDGs, for example. We also aligned all of the policies and strategies to the existing documents within the African Union. And we also referred to all of the documents within the FAO, and so on and so forth, just because there are a lot of documents in which we have referred to when we established all of the documents that we have now in Madagascar to promote the blue economy for the betterment of the fishermen, but for a better resilience for everyone. So I'm not going to be very long, since I know you are getting tired, but I would like to conclude my first intervention by saying that there are a couple of, there's a list of, let's say, there's a list of issues that have been identified globally in Africa and in Madagascar. I quote, for example, the case of overfishing, climate change, bad governance, corruption, and so on and so forth. So for us to face and to address all of these issues, we need to stand together. It's not only a government task. This is the task for everyone. Each of us has a role to play. Each of us has something to do. Civil society, academia, private sector, government. These are the 4 pillars that need to work together to collaborate, to commonly address all of these issues. So just to witness to you, for example, that all of these stakeholders that I have named, they are all represented in this room now. And even for the case from Madagascar, please raise your hand for votes from Madagascar. Please. So these are, as you can see now, Madagascar is very well represented in this event. And that is once again to witness to you that we are commonly working together for the betterment of the Malagasy people. And we are ready to share all of our experiences. We are ready to share, let's say, the little knowledge that we have to address and face all of the issues that I have just named later. Thank you so much for your attention.
Working together, collaborating together. I think that's what I'm getting from this. So I first met Robert, Honorable Minister, at the last TBTI gathering, and we have continued working together since then, more than 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say we have an investment project in his country, and we'll be there early next year to appraise it. So working together, it yields results. Networks makes it possible for us to learn and for us to be able to understand where we're coming from. Talking about networks. The bank has always had its partners that they work together, that supports them, and together they have a common vision. It is an honor to call upon Dr. Yuan, who is a Deputy Director in the FAO. My colleague, Dr. Yuan.
Thanks, dear Excellencies. Good evening to everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Very happy to join this World Small-Scale Fishery Congress in Cape Town. So basically, this evening I was inspired, particularly by the speech of Minister. I think we are raising the awareness as well as the recognition of the small scale. As also, you see the program, too big to ignore, the TBTI, and also now with the EFR, we call it too small, but the high value. Yeah, so I think this is all, this awareness was raised in recent years. So my first message this evening is we are getting a proof of our awareness on the small scale. So I think this is the first message I would like to say. And this morning, and even today, it's the World Fisheries Day. I think a lot of events that was happened, even including the headquarters of FAO. So during the lunch break, not a break, but it's a long time. So our DG and also the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, we are celebrating with World Fisheries Day. And I think there's a lot of information to be shared. But I just want to highlight 3 numbers. The first one is small scale contribute 40% of the global production for fisheries. I think you already don't know. And also there's about 60 million employees was directly involved with this small scale. And also there's about 500 million stakeholders involved with the nutrition and the livelihood. So I think this is a big number, as we all understand of this information. So with all of your efforts and also with the government, as well as all friends of fisheries and agriculture, we are recognized this year is the International Year for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. So I think that's why everyone understands that EFR, that just like a term we are speaking of this year. So I thank you very much for recognizing of this small scale. But at some time, also we have a second message is the small scale should be supported and protected. So one of the messages from today's in FAO headquarters for the celebration of this World Fisheries Day is to protect our small-scale stakeholders in fisheries and aquaculture. So I think this is one of the main issues. They are too small. Their investment, their skills, their education, even their operation is small. So they need to be protected, particularly as I already mentioned about these challenges for climate change, or for global warming, or even for the extreme weather conditions. All this is a risk to the small scale. So I think this is why we say they need to be supported and protected. Third one, as you all know, FAO is a knowledge center. So all these small scale should be empowered. So we have to support them in their livelihood, or in their organization, in their skills, everything we can support for them to get more power to be sustained of their livelihood. And also, why I'm here today, because we are also supporting with the new strategy in FAO. This is under the new FAO strategy. And maybe you also know these 4 betters: better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. So under this one, particularly under the better production, we have been proposing a new strategy is for the blue transformation. So I think this is already, I think you see the thing of the SOFIA 2022. The thing on the cover page is towards blue transformation. So how it comes, actually, you may already know, last year, because later on our speakers will also talk about the UN nutrition, the coordinating mechanism. They had a very nice review about the food system for the global population. So then also last year we organized the global food system transformation. I think you also know. So there's a talk about this land-based food versus this aquatic or water-based food. So during that one, also now FAO is calling for blue transformation. That means we would like to increase the potential of aquatic food in our daily healthy diet. So I think this is one of the main issues. So under that strategy, we have 3 main objectives. The first one is to sustain our aquaculture through intensification and expansion. Second one is to fully control our capture fisheries. To improve the management and also the efficiency. The third one is to improve the accessibility for everyone through value chain post-harvest, as well as to reduce waste and loss. So these 3 objectives is the new framework of blue transformation. So I think this is really nicely debriefing about the policy, but of course we are calling for country action. So I think today, through this year and also in the next few years, we are calling for action through this blue transformation. So one of that, I think also our colleagues already mentioned about this networking and the partnership. So one of the partnership we are now is calling for is a global partnership for sustainable aquaculture advancement. So we are united all stakeholders, including the academia, many for working for technology and innovation, also government to promote them with the national action plan, as well as the business and the small scale holders in all this sector. So knowledge and experience sharing, I think this is the thing of this sharing the excellent examples from the global one, from every region. So then today we have this summit here. So I really appreciate all of these efforts, and also FAO is ready to work with you together, with the government, with the civil organization and private sector. All these, even you already know this public-private partnership, PPP, is always promoted. So I think this is some message I just want to speak this evening. I hope you will get FAO in your eye, and also we are also always ready to support. Thank you very much.
Once again, standing together, working together, we can see synergy, we can see complementarities. It's interesting to see how IAFA and TVTI has meshed. I never saw that one coming, but it's a good one. And I can imagine maybe next year, instead of IAFA, it will be IDAFA, International Day for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, November 21st. Who knows? You may never see that coming, neither. In any event, talking about partnership and synergies and complementarities, I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, who is coming from WWF. We have been working with WWF for a long time. The bank has a strong partnership with WWF. In fact, one of my close colleagues, we used to work together in the same office, and today we'll hear much more from Sam. Sam, please.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's really a great joy to be here with you and to share some of what WWF is up to in response to the question that was posed to us. What are those big pathways to scale up impact across the region? And so maybe just before I start, I wanted to perhaps draw your attention to the map that's on the screen. That is, so WWF has got a renewed investment in the Southwest Indian Ocean. I think many of you will know that we've been active for decades across the 5 countries shown in that map. And the orange dots are where we have our field teams and field investments, and then teams in the capitals of those 5 countries to really ensure that those on-ground investments are driving change at a national and regional scale. But I'm really pleased to announce that over the last few months, the WWF International Network has really taken a strong focus on the region, and will be scaling up our investments, and particularly the role of civil society organizations and building and empowering civil society networks across the region. So, the way we're thinking about this new phase and really grappling with that question that Ahmed just posed to us around what are those pathways to scale up action. We have a three-phased or three-pronged approach, nice and easy: scaling up, scaling out, and scaling deep. So the scaling out really is about replicating best practices and really also doing that by unlocking finance at scale. And so we've also heard this evening about the need to, one of the big challenges in many of these projects is that they are too small. In terms of the investment, they're small and they're risky investments for big financial institutions with high transaction costs. And I think a number of us in this room would have been at the UN Ocean Conference earlier this year, and then at COP27 just concluding a few days ago, and heard that, really incredible commitments being made by the financial sector, being made by development and government aid cooperation, but really, and the extent to which the need is on the ground, but very, very little opportunity for that finance to truly flow to the people and the places that need it the most. So one of the things that we're passionate about working with the bank and our partners, Finance Earth, and Swire Tuna Network, is to explore how we can bring those projects together and to aggregate them into a way that can attract private sector finance to be able to scale those. So that's the first around scaling out. So scaling up is really about taking what's working on the ground and embedding that in policy. And again, a lot of what we've heard about today is the wave of conversation and narrative around the sustainable blue economy. And OECD have predicted that blue economy is going to double in Africa over the next 10 years. But what does that mean for small-scale fisheries and communities who are dependent on these resources for their livelihoods and for food security? And so the two things that we're really passionate about, the one is making sure that those blue economy or blue growth strategies are truly sustainable blue economy. We see the trajectories in our oceans sort of trending in the wrong direction, and so to really make sure that that blue growth and the hopes and aspirations of a sustainable blue economy truly are built off a foundation of a healthy ocean that doesn't undermine its ability to continue to provide those benefits for the future. And the second, and even more important to us in terms of the sustainable blue economy agenda, is inclusive. So I really, every time we hear blue economy, I want to encourage you to be thinking inclusive and sustainable, because of the risks, while the potential is enormous for the blue economy to address food security, to address livelihoods, alleviate poverty, it equally holds the risk of undermining so much of that and seeing a few benefit from that economic growth at the expense of many. So that's the second, a strong focus on embedding and ensuring the correct policy environment. And then the third piece, scaling deep. And this is really about relationships, it's about building capacity, and it's about building networks. And so for much of coastal East Africa and many parts of Africa, the coastal communities are in fact de facto stewards, custodians of coastal resources. And so, it's really unfair of us to kind of almost, without perhaps doing it explicitly, but putting that burden of responsibility on coastal communities to be conserving, whether it's their mangroves as key nursery areas for fisheries or the small-scale fisheries themselves. And so there's a real need, I think, for us as a community to come alongside communities and come alongside civil society organizations to build the capacity for coastal communities to be effective in that role as custodians of those resources. And along with that then is to build CSO networks so that the voice of communities can truly be brought up through national networks and regional networks to make sure that the meaningful needs and issues of the communities are truly heard and influencing policy at national, regional, and international scales, and that some of the outcomes and findings and things can then trickle back down. And so it's a real joy to see so many of our CSO partners here, and Swire Tuna as a network of civil society organizations across the region. And we're truly committed to further building and empowering those networks to be effective in supporting our coastal communities across the region. So those are the three: scaling up, scaling out, and scaling deep. And to end with WWF's kind of catchline, together possible. And it truly is only together with all our various roles and competencies and expertise that we can build the future that we all hope for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. If you want to hear more about what WWF is doing and what we are trying to do with them, please join us tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and you get to hear more about access to finance. So the next speaker is someone who is hard to introduce. Maybe I will let him introduce himself. Is Rashid available?
Sorry, Ahmed. Yeah, I was trying to fix the place here. I'm here. Okay.
So yeah. Rashid in Vancouver, and Rashid is always available. It doesn't matter what time, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, he's there. So that's the best way to introduce him. He's available to support research, knowledge, policy, and practice on the continent. Rashid, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Ahmed, and thanks to the whole organizing committee for doing this. And I have to apologize for not being there because usually I do my best to go when Africa calls, but unfortunately today I couldn't do it. I had to get to my class early enough so that after this I can set up and have my classes from 9 to 12 noon. It's actually 8:20 here now. So after this, I'll have to just go off and prepare for the class. So that's why I'm not with you. And so I've heard quite a bit of what people have said, really good points. I'm not going to try to repeat them. I'll just say a few more. I have 5 minutes, actually. That's what I'm allocated. So the first thing I want to say is Africa is a very big continent. It has a very long coastline. And I think apart from Asia, Africa has the longest, if I have my information right. So to me, that means a huge opportunity for the continent, right? To actually find a way to interact with the ocean in ways that are sustainable and in ways that actually help to improve the lives of Africans and people living in Africa. So that's my first point. Now, if you think about the ocean, the blue economy is larger than the ocean. So I'm focusing on the ocean now. We have all the freshwater systems, very important in Africa. But excuse me to just focus on the ocean here. If you look at our relationship with the ocean, we the people, we do two things when we go to the ocean. We take the things we need, the things we desire, the things we wish from the ocean, the fish and all the other things, right? We take them into our economy, into our culture, into our social systems. We do what we do with them. And what do we produce at the end? Waste. And where do the waste go? They go to the ocean, to nature. So the challenge for Africa and the world is how to do this taking, not to overtake, not to destroy the habitat, not to take out all the mommies and daddies, say of the fish and all the animals in there. We have to make sure we don't overtake and then we don't overpollute, right? And I think for Africa to do this, for any continent to do this, we need knowledge, we need science, we need to understand the value of the ocean and what we take on. So, which means we need investment. We need to understand this. You need the science, you need the data. And this is one of the points I want to make here. Somehow, Africans, we have to find a way to invest in the things that matter for us. And I'm actually talking about local investment. Our friends and allies all over the world can help, but we have to put our money where our mouth is as a starting point. And I'm saying this because I truly believe that Africans, and when I say Africans, I'm talking about those at home and those of us away and interact with the continent, we are richer than we think. And if we just get the right thinking, we're going to move this continent, not only in the blue economy, but all over, all right? So we are richer than we think. We're a big continent. We have clever people. We just have to find a way to mix all of this to make the ocean sustainable and our people a better livelihood. So that is the big thing. Now, the third point is we also have to decide what our fisheries, what the ocean is to us, what is the objective of society? Is it just to make profit for a few people or to make these resources feed as many people as possible, nourish them? My dear friend Shakuntala is here. She will say, no, don't just feed. You nourish people. It's better. It's more than just feeding people. Give them healthy food, right? So is that what we want? And if that is what we want, we will have to put the systems in place to ensure that. Do we want the big boats to come and scoop all the fish, or we want our coastal communities to have access to resources, which is actually theirs because they're living adjacent to that? This has to be deliberately planned. We cannot just wish this to happen. So talking about values, and that fits into the objective. I gave a talk in Namibia, and I started by telling them this years ago that I think 3 ministers were there, that of Sierra Leone, the Seychelles and Namibian minister, and the diamond sector was in there. One of the things I told them is that I believe that fish is more valuable than diamond. Oh my gosh. It was like I told them something that they never thought anyone could say. So if Nigerians, I tell you, fish is more valuable than oil. And people will say I'm crazy. Why do I say that? If we think about fish, fish is renewable, right? Fish is renewable. If we manage fish wisely, it can continue to nourish us, to give us basic economics, our livelihood forever for our children, grandchildren, and theirs. So fish, anything that gives you benefit, even if it is just small yearly, if you sum it mathematically to infinity, the benefit is infinity. So actually that led to my new book, which is, the title is Infinity Fish. So some of those of you who haven't heard, check it out, you know. It's a bit too expensive, I apologize for that, but I think just the chapter 1 will set the stage for this value thing. How about diamond? Diamond, if you take a ton of diamond today, it's gone forever. People tell you diamond is forever. No, if you dig a ton of diamond today, you can't go back tomorrow to dig it. And you tell me, oh, I will invest the money and that will give you a flow. Most of us don't invest anything. We blow the money. Our governments are in deficits. But fish is like a trust. It can feed the people forever. So please note that. The second thing is that diamond is rich for a few people, right? In Namibia, the BS, a few Namibians do all the exploitation. But actually, fish is valuable for many. You go along the coast, all over the continent, people, some of them, their animal protein is from fish. All the small-scale fishes feed their families, subsistence fishing. That is immense value. So that is, I think, and knowing this will help us to design the kind of objective that will help Africa make its ocean and its fisheries work for people living in Africa. That should be the priority, in my view. I'm getting close. Now, how do you start doing this? Number one, people have talked a lot about collaboration, and I think it's very important, partnership. We have a lot of fisheries agreements with other countries or regions, the EU, China. You know, I really think the African countries have to come into partnership, and there are elements of this. In Namibia, Angola, South Africa, they have the Benguela Current Commission. In East Africa, you have the SADC. In Southern Africa, we have ECOWAS. In West Africa, we have North Africa. I think if we collaborate and come together, you will be able to negotiate with these countries to make sure that the agreements are at least mutually beneficial. And the small island Pacific states in the Pacific actually do this. They come together, the FFA, and they're able to negotiate with Japan, with big USA, and get better deals. I think we need to do that. And not only that, with that kind of collaboration, you can chip in resources, get the monitoring and control system we need in all the big regions and continentally to make sure that illegal fishing doesn't happen in Africa's waters. You don't allow people to steal the fish and the resources of the people and take it away. So collaboration, partnership is central. The next one is, I think we need to develop smart, small-scale fishery. We need to train people, invest in training. Young Africans, Africa, I think Nigeria, I saw the data last week. 60% of the people are under 25 or 29, right? Lots of potential if only our governments and the system, civil society will work to give these young people the opportunities so they can grow. So we need to train people. In DC here, we have the British Columbia Young Fishers Association. They bring accountants to teach them finance people how to manage. And they care about the environment because they know that is how they get infinity fish. Finally, I really don't think we can solve all our fisheries problems just thinking within the fisheries sector. We need to open up. We look at ways, and that's why the training is very important. If you train a girl how to collect fisheries data, how to play with numbers, how to manage accounts, she can go off and start a data informatics company or whatever. So let's give the young people the knowledge and the skills they need to make the blue economy work for the continent sustainably, but also open the whole world of opportunities for them. Thank you very much. Check out Infinity Fish. It's a very positive title, and that is the way to go. Let's remain positive for the sake of people like Mandela and all the top African leaders from independence who had a beautiful dream. We, the current generation, have to bring these dreams to reality, and we can do it, okay? We can do it. Let's go do it. Thank you.
For those who may not know, Rashid is one of the founding members of TBTI, and together with Sven and many others here, they have nurtured and trained many scholars, including myself.
Ahmed, you didn't need to tell them that. Okay, it's all right. You're doing so well. We are so proud of you.
Disclosure.
Yeah.
So whilst we are waiting for our next speaker online, we'll invite a colleague of ours, Dr. Bernice McLean, could not make it today, but in her space, we have Blessing Mafumo from AU NEPAD, who will tell us more about what NEPAD is doing, especially with some of the new initiatives in industrialization and aquaculture. Please welcome Blessing. Blessing is a blessing there.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Minister and Chair. So I am standing in for Dr. Bernice McLean. She is in Niger right now. She, as some of you know her, she is heading the industrialization program, which is a very big program for the AU-IBAR NEPAD. So she really wanted to be with us and connect with many of you, friends and colleagues, but she had to send me to come in and represent her and also to deliver a message from AU-IBAR NEPAD. Yeah, they have what we call a 10-year work program on fisheries and aquaculture, which encapsulates small-scale fisheries. But first, I thought I should let you know, because many people have got this question: what does AU-IBAR NEPAD do? What does AU-IBAR do? Or what does the AU system do? In retrospect, the AU-IBAR NEPAD, they are basically there to coordinate and execute priority regional and continental projects to promote regional integration towards accelerated realization of Agenda 2063, to strengthen capacity of African Union member states and regional bodies, and advance knowledge-based advisory support, and undertake the full range of resource mobilization, and also serve as the continent's technical interface with all Africa's development stakeholders and development partners. So now, in terms of policy framework, when you look into the fisheries and aquaculture context, we have got the key policy instruments. For example, the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, is more like the overarching policy instrument that governs their work program on fisheries and aquaculture in Africa. Then we have the blueprint, which many of you are aware of, that is the policy framework and the reform strategy for fisheries and aquaculture in Africa. If you do not have a copy of that book or guidebook or strategy, you can download it. It's available if you Google it up. It's a very interesting investment out of the Africa Union when it comes to developing fisheries and aquaculture in Africa. And now we have got the Africa Blue Economy Strategy, which just came in. And then we have got other instruments like, as the moderator has said, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which they are looking into seriously as to how it can influence the development of sustainable, fisheries and aquaculture in our continent. And then there are a range of other, policy frameworks that are at play. So to develop this action plan on fisheries and aquaculture, it has been a roadmap which started, I think, in Abuja in 2005. Those ones who are aware of the Fish for All Summit that took place in Abuja in 2005, that actually captured some of the challenges and perspectives and opportunities that the continent has. And then from there, there's been a roadmap which led to the CAMFA. Those ones who, I think Sloan's material has been the champion for the CAMFA programs. These are conferences for ministers on fisheries where these issues were discussed at high level and priorities were brought forth. Then the policy framework and reform strategy, the policy arena have placed small-scale fisheries development high on the agenda. There are 7 pillars, by the way. Conservation and sustainable resource use, small-scale fisheries development, sustainable aquaculture development, responsible and equitable fish trade and marketing, strengthened regional and sub-regional cooperation, awareness, enhancing and human capacity development, and high seas fisheries. But of course, at AU-IBAR, there are other cross-cutting issues like strengthening resilience, reducing vulnerability to climate change, gender and youth, private sector investment and financing mechanisms. I understand all these have been a subject of discussion during our forum this week. So just to unpack the action plan for small-scale fisheries development in Africa. So in 2016, they had what you call a continental think tank meeting on small-scale fisheries development, which happened in Dakar, Senegal. And that think tank meeting came up with priority areas for increased governance of the sector. And I can just quickly read you the 3 key priority areas. The first one is the role and importance of fisheries for improved livelihoods, food and income for small-scale fishing communities and related operators are evident, recognized, and secured in member states. Then the second priority area is the bilateral and regional cooperation, which we heard from the previous panelists there, for effective management of shared fisheries resources and ecosystems. That needs to be strengthened. And then the last priority area is that fishers are organized to foster good fisheries governance, sustainable development, and responsible use of natural resources. And this can very much be achieved by enhancing capacity development and stakeholder participation. So the key message from AU-IBAR is they want to walk the journey with you for sustainable small-scale fisheries, working together in unison with partners and all actors in the small-scale fisheries value chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Blessing. So there's a strong connection between the regional economic communities, RECs, like SADC, with NEPAD, as well as with AU-IBAR. That will be a conversation for another time. For now, we may want to go to our next speaker, Dr. Hambayi, who will provide us with a sense of what it means to mainstream fisheries in food system, especially during crisis.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Just confirm that you can hear me, or at least see me. Thank you very much. May I just write on the protocol observed by the previous speakers? My name is Mutinta Hambai, and I lead the nutrition and school-based program here in Nairobi, World Food Program Regional Office. I think in the 5 minutes that I have, let me just break it down. First, we see that malnutrition is increasing. We're making a lot of progress as a continent, but in the last 2 years, given COVID, given the conflicts, given also the prices, we are seeing that the malnutrition levels have almost doubled in some of the places. One of the drivers really is unaffordability of, for example, nutrient-rich foods. And we actually see that between 50 to 70% of the households are not able to afford a nutrient-rich diet, because it's expensive. And so the consumption of nutrient-rich foods such as fish is also, declining or not sufficient enough. And the statistics are very telling. You have, for example, the Horn of Africa, where less than the consumption is about 5 kilograms per capita per year. And really, this is very little amount compared to other parts of the world where you have about 58 kilograms per capita per year. And so some of the opportunities that I see is really the application of the food systems lens. I think the food systems lens has helped us not to focus on malnutrition as a disease, but to focus on improving diets through the different pillars, which really is key in terms of preventing disease, disability, and deaths in some of the cases. So the food systems lens is really key. I think one of the interesting factors is that there were quite a number of studies that showed that when we look at the food environment across the three pillars, we see that there's no deliberate framework that seeks to improve the consumption of fish. Rather, we speak in very, the policies are around improving diets, perhaps animal source foods, but really the interactive policies to improve the consumption of fish. So that's one area I think where we could be really working together and providing more support. My other opportunity point, for example, is the school meals. On the continent and right now, we have what we call the School Meals Coalition, where governments have signed that they'll feed their children because it's no longer just about learning, it's also about the learner, and as part of human capital and rural transformation. And so using the school meals or the school feeding as a platform, we have the opportunity both to increase the demand for the school kids as well as the supply by improving the smallholder farmers or smallholder fishing communities. And so really, I think, the message here is that the diets are not even getting better. How can we use the school platform and support, governments in their desire to feed the children for better learning? I submit. Thank you very much.
We deliberately kept the last two speakers to speak on nutrition, health, and diet because we think it's important. One of the goals for Feed Africa is to work towards malnourishment and malnutrition. To that, we have our next speaker, who again is hard to introduce. All I can say is that she's the previous World Food Laureate. Shakuntala, please.
Thank you so much, Rashid. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello? Yes. Okay, good. Yes. And greetings to all on this World Fisheries Day. Let us remember the people throughout our world, including the poor and vulnerable, who are dependent on fisheries for their food, culture, and traditions, as well as their livelihoods and income. And when we do so, let us remember to adhere to the principle of leaving no one behind, as we strive to ensure sustainable, well-managed fisheries, both in marine and inland water bodies. I will take this opportunity to give you 3 high-level tangible actions coming from where I stand and my focus on food and agriculture. And I see these actions are important for ensuring that diverse aquatic feeds nourish people and our planet. Firstly, government and policymakers must take action to develop food-based dietary guidelines for all peoples, and that these food-based dietary guidelines are first culturally acceptable and sustainable, and include the use of diverse, nutritious, and safe foods, including aquatic foods. Secondly, we must set aside investments for financing research and partnerships for research, as was mentioned by Rashid. These food-based dietary guidelines are a powerful tool to influence diets and nourish different population groups, including women and young children. In investing in research, let me give an example, which I think is an important part of the research we need to do. We need to have much more research on the nutritional composition of diverse aquatic foods, including the multiple minerals, vitamins, and essential fatty acids which are found in diverse aquatic foods. And most importantly, we must conduct the research as to the enhancing factor of aquatic foods on the micronutrients which are found in the plant-based foods on the plate. Just imagine if, for example, you would add a small amount of aquatic foods to the plate of food, then this can increase the bioavailability of nutrients that are found in the other foods on the plate, the plant source foods, by a factor 2 to 3. Thirdly, we must invest in youth. Just look at the populations and all the actors that are in the aquatic food sectors. It is important for us to invest in youth, including young women. And we must ensure that their engagement builds on strengthened capacity, new innovations and technologies, including new data technologies, while at the same time we integrate traditional and indigenous knowledge. So these are the 3 points I want to give from my perspective. Many of these have been given before by many of the speakers in many other ways. And I do look forward to working with you in Africa. The year of IAFA is now coming to a close. Also, this year was declared as the year of nutrition in Africa. So there's much we can build on and going forward to ensure that we use aquatic foods and sustainable fisheries to nourish all peoples in Africa. Thank you.
As I said earlier, my job is a simple one, an exciting one, and I think I've come to a close. My colleague will take over. Samuel, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. You did well. You did the most. I don't know how I was going to introduce Dr. Shakuntala, but you did. Thank you very much and good evening. I know it's 15 minutes before we see the captain, right, Ratana? So, is it 20? Okay. When we put together this policy forum with Ahmed and inputs from Ratana and colleagues, there were 3 questions we wanted to be answered by the panelists, and I think they did a good job. The first question was, what are the examples of the best management and governance practices that need scalability and replication? And I think you heard what WWF brought to the table. How are they scaling out, up, and deep? Am I right? Yes. The other question was, what are the gaps in policy and practice to facilitate the sector, and what novel management tools are needed to scale out aquatic food production? And I think FAO brought the 4 betas, and I think we got strong messages from the minister talking about how we can work together with all other stakeholders. And I think it was also demonstrated how us as development organization, policy, intergovernmental organizations are working together. Examples were given. And I think there are a lot of messages that came out of those discussions that were led by the panelists. The last question we wanted to be answered was, what policy frameworks and strategic pathways can ensure that fish diets are locally produced and are accessible to local communities with strengthened role of youth and women SMEs? And I think, as Ahmed indicated, it was deliberate to have the two speakers who gave their view on the role that fish plays in nutrition security, and nutrition being one of the key entry points. So without wasting time, I think you also have been, you have that appetite. I think they managed to whet your appetite. You have questions that you would like to ask. This is your chance. Ratan, I don't know how we are going to deal with the virtual questions. Okay, all right. So you will be able to say that. Maybe we should start with that one, Ratan. Yeah. Okay, Faluke.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm here. Yes, my first.
Yes, please.
Yes, my first question. I want to thank all the panelists. They've spoken well, and I kept hearing better livelihood. And I'm wondering that the SSS community in Nigeria are currently facing the devastating effects of climate change, flooding as we speak, as we are all seated here. So how do we here scale up, out and deep to have the necessary immediate support for these communities, and policies that will ensure that there are supports for SSF communities in terms of mitigation and adaptation strategies, which we do not have. And after I've sent this question, Blessing spoke, and I think I have something to say about his presentation. We have all the initiatives by NEPAD, all the policy framework by AU-IBAR, everything in place. But there's a big gap between all these initiatives and what the state government in Africa are doing. We have them, they are good. If they have been implemented, we won't be where we are today, but they're just there. All the policy framework, we have all the things we need to move forward. But our governments, are they committed to getting these things done? And when the two last speakers, I thank them for what they spoke about consumption of fish and so on. I know that the communities, oh yes, they live by water, they live by the fish and they get the fish. But what I think is happening is that they're thinking more of survival above nutrition. So when they get the fish, what they want to do is sell the fish, make money to meet other needs than even thinking of their own dietary needs. So I think we need to have practical solutions. We need to get our governments to be committed to taking care of the small-scale fisheries communities and doing it, not just having all the initiatives and things to be done, framework in place that are not being implemented or that are not being funded. And I want to thank God that African Development Bank is here. We need to do things that are practical, that we get to the small-scale fisheries community so that they will know that they are part of a government that is Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faluke. Can I have questions from the floor? Professor Isaacs.
Am I audible? Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for a high-level presentations from all of you. I don't necessarily agree with all the things that you say because I'm an academic, so we have a critical mind and scholarship. But I wanted to ask the following question. I wanted to know from all of you whether how disruptive can one be with the bank's finance? Meaning that a lot of the poor people, vulnerable people, nutrition poor people need cash transfers. To what extent is the bank looking at handing cash directly to the vulnerable people and small-scale people? We see a lot of cash, talk a lot of so many billions that is around, and we see also extreme poverty on the other side. To me is, how disruptive can you be from the bank, from different institutions, NEPAD, FAO, Madagascar Minister, WWF, when in actual fact people say we need cash in our hand to change our livelihood. And for me, that part of not necessarily social protection, we're not talking about the begging bowl, just enough food for you to survive, but we're talking about a cash transfer for you to lead a sustainable livelihood. And if we want to talk about alternative livelihoods, why not make that cash transfer a sustainable one? And that is my question. How disruptive are you, and how disruptive can you be with this? Thank you.
Thank you, Muniba. I'll take two more questions before I allow the panel to respond.
Thank you very much, ladies and Senegal. I really appreciate this opportunity given, this receptivity given to meet, person representing an institution with, diverse, profile, bank, FAO, and so on. I was very impressed by, the declarations that have been made in terms of, objective expected or by through this, blue economy program. But my main concern is that, whatever, for me, I believe that whatever it is, program we intend to implement, as far as there is a status quo that still remains, meaning, from my point of view, and based on what I observed on the field, the fact that there is still no political will in order to implement fantastic juridical and scientific tools. Some of them are issued by, for example, the FAO. If you talk about, for example, the guidelines, and there was a prior instrument that is the ecosystem approach for fisheries. All these instruments are sleeping, for example, in offices. They are not, implemented. So as far as there is this implementation gap, I'm wondering whether we can really realize the dreams that are expressed here. Because at the same time we are talking about all this very fantastic ambition and objective, in terms of governance is worsening. For example, if we go on borders, I'm talking about what is happening, daily speaking, in the fisheries. You go to central market today. Take the example of Senegal. You have juveniles, like this, caught by industrial fisheries that today feed, the population. Because when we talk about, the contribution fisheries, for food security, we must know how it happened today, how it works today. Who's feeding whom, and how. The connection between the consumer and the small-scale fisheries has changed in our time. The population is depending on industrial fleet, that provide, community like this code in the West African, talking about West Africa, by, the nationality of fleet, no longer know. So this is a question of, it's related to poor governance. And the responsibility of government and state are engaged. So my concern is how far we can continue. Really, it's a fantastic, I think, this ambition, we are sharing with us. But as far as neither FO, nor the African Development Bank, or ASICS or NEPA, have any means of pressure to really ban certain practice. Let's talk about the use of fish that was usually destined for consumption, that is now used for fish meal. It's not possible. We can't continue, for example, breeding. I like breeding. If at the same time these bad practices continue are ongoing on the continent, and I know that many international agencies know that, but why don't we ban this? I'm not pessimistic, I'm very optimistic human being, but I think it's very important to take into account. It's not possible otherwise. The status quo can't continue like that. And the way to do it is not where we expect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alio, for the observation. One more question.
Thank you very much. That was a really great panel to hear the different perspectives from leaders in the sector. My question is a very simple one. We talk about blue economy, blue growth, and we seldom realize that all the sectors that are inherent in blue economy, all the 17 or 18 sectors, have been historically the drivers of injustice, drivers of marginalization, drivers of what small-scale fisheries have been today. And all the problems that we talk about, in a way, are well connected to some of these sectors that we are thinking in terms of blue economy, blue growth. The combination of blue growth and blue economy with the notion of justice is a really tricky one. I'm not sure what is the entry point for us, especially for the panelists. Do we talk about blue growth and blue economy as an entry point, and just cursively mention that blue justice really matters, whereas justice issues are very systemic in nature, they are deep-rooted and they are there. We have not solved any of them until now. So my confusion is, without giving proper attention to the issues of justice that are inherent, that have been there for ages and generations, we are going into blue growth and blue economy. At the same time, the realization is it's going to cause more of injustice, more of disbalance, more of marginalization. So I would like to hear from all of you your perspectives on how do you think of balancing these two opposing forces while one acts as a driver of the other. My question is, again, do we talk about blue justice as a natural corollary to blue growth? Because those justice issues are going to resolve from them. We don't want to see that the combinations don't work properly, because the combination of artisanal fishery and aquaculture has been very confusing for many of us. So we are again going into blue justice and blue economy as two terms or concepts, and in the real world, how do we combine those two remains to be seen. I would like to hear some more reflections on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give each panelist a chance to take a bite, and starting virtually. Dr. Mutinta,
Come
are you
on.
still there?
I'm
Yes,
still
please.
here, thank you. I think just to, from the lady from the university, very, very good question indeed. Cash as a modality enables people to make choices, dignity and all the preferences. We have started as World Food Program now to provide cash from about 10 million to 440 million within the region. And obviously provided one, there's market assessment to make sure that the markets are functional, or what kinds of assets in terms of the businesses that households would need to do. So I just wanted to make a point that it is a good question, and indeed, as an organization, we are now providing cash. The 4.7 million people, for example, in Somalia, 60% of their the modality that they receive is cash, and they are along the sea line. But of course, the issue is the consumption patterns and the choices that people make up around what they eat. So in addition to providing cash for consumption, I think it's also important to make sure that there's behavior change communication and understanding communities on what they prefer to eat. I'll leave it there. Maybe Dr. Shakuntala can add. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shakuntala?
Thank you. With respect to providing cash, I do think that there are many communities who will be able to manage this, but there are also certain guidelines that must be in place and certain other factors that must be in place so that they can make best use of cash, and especially in households with children, because if we would then focus on the benefits that nutritious foods and nutritious diets have for children, pregnant and lactating women, then I do think we can go far. So it's not just cash without putting other parts of the puzzle into place and assisting households so that they can make the best use of the cash they gave. That question that we had at the very last about justice and equity, it's a really big issue, and it takes us back to to many things that have happened in the past to different populations group, to different nations, and to different peoples. But I do think we must go forward, and we must learn from the past, and we must make sure that some of the atrocities that have happened, injustices that have happened, do not happen again. And I think we haven't, if we would, when we put policies and actions into place, we must work with certain principles. And we have these principles. We talk about the right to food, leaving no one behind. And we talk about ensuring that what other actions we put in place are equitable and just. And we have to adhere to these policies no matter what we do, and hold ourselves and others accountable, that in the policies we set, the actions that we have called for, even those actions we have called for in this panel today, adhere to these principles, and we begin with them.
Thank you very much. Nipat Auda.
Okay. Yeah, all I can say is to respond to Dr. Foluke's question on the policy frameworks which the AU has developed over the years. I believe that this is a key first step. And I understand the expectation has been that these policies or policy instruments, these are continental policy instruments with the expectation that they will be domesticated in the member states or in the countries of Africa. And they were built upon international best practices to the local context, of course. But I totally agree that there's weaknesses. Some of these policies and documents, I could say, are obsolete, and which is why there is now this policy review mechanism. And I understand Dr. Sloan Chimatiro is here, who has been a champion in this regard. The implementation of these policy documents is always a complex matrix, to my understanding, because of the political will in each country, as well as the country's economic status. For example, some countries can prioritize what we're talking about today, whereas others they just don't put it as a priority. So there is a range of all these disparities amongst the countries, and also their structural systems as well as their institutions within those countries. But over and above, these things, they take time. And I've been in the fisheries and aquaculture sector for 22 years now, and I remember when we started back 22 years, and where we are today, I can actually see a lot of developments, a lot of positive things that are happening. I was speaking to our FishNet today, and what they are doing, how they got organized, and how they are creating all these new innovations and value-added products. These things, we never had them back then. So in hindsight, I would say that these things, some of these things, they take time, but I think we are doing okay. We are on the roadmap, but a lot needs to be done still. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Dr. Shunwa.
Thank you very much. So I just want to follow from the last question. You are asking for there are many sectors to be covered with the blue economy. And definitely, because I'm on behalf of FAO, the food and nutrition should come first. So this is my suggestion of our understanding. So no matter it's from land or it's from water, they always, I think, they have to produce food for the humankind, for the population. So usually we say we are breathed by our land and our water. So I think this should be encouraged. We produce food locally. So I think this is the first one. And as you also mentioned, there are some challenges with the challenges, no matter how we can make food security, also getting some input, our support from the government or from the finance agencies. I think there also we have to collaborate with the government and respect the local, as already mentioned, the national management scheme. So I think all these, as FAO, we would like to promote, support with the technical solutions based on science and based on the local conditions as well as the enabling environment. So that's my message. Thank you.
Thank you, Shinyo. Sam?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, I'd like to respond to two of the questions. So the first, Professor Isaacs, asking about can banks be disruptive and what role finance plays, kind of perhaps more broadly. And I wanted to just share with you that one model that's been very successful for us, and I know that other partners, development partners in the region have implemented successfully as well, has been the village banks. And I think we heard some presentations today as well. So we've established 800 village banks across the Southwest Indian Ocean and have committed to establish another 1,000 of these. And I think that they have really shown to me the value of bringing, and these are particularly women-led saving schemes. So while they haven't lifted people directly out of poverty, they certainly have helped to keep food on the table. They've helped in situations where, bad weather events, where fishers aren't able to go out to sea. They help to keep children in school and to bridge gaps in finance and small businesses. And so I think they've played an incredible role in building resilience in communities. The second piece for me there are some very real challenges for the private sector and banks included to invest in projects. And I think that's the other thing as a community, we need to really come together around thinking, how do we build a pipeline of bankable projects that can attract private sector finance, that can overcome some of the hurdles that the financial sector has. We know that there is a lot of interest, a lot of intention to invest in these spaces. And we know, as Professor Isaacs pointed out, the need is enormous. But the number of transactions is really small. And so that really requires us to come together around fewer, bigger projects that can unlock these sorts of finances for coastal communities. And then I also wanted to just reflect on the question around historical sectors being the drivers of overexploitation. And I think that the sustainable blue economy kind of narrative holds enormous promise for sustainable development across the region and across Africa, but only if people are at the center of that discussion. We really are at a knife edge. I feel that if we, the whole blue growth and blue economy narrative actually has the potential to further prop up business as usual, in fact, accelerate it to the benefit perhaps of a few, but to the, undermining the value of healthy oceans to society more broadly. And I think we deeply understand the connection between healthy oceans and the well-being of coastal communities. So making sure that community and community representatives have a strong voice in these discussions is going to be absolutely critical to seeing sustainable development and not seeing an acceleration of business as usual.
Thanks, Sam. I'm not sure if it's gonna. You want to say something on it, or should I go straight to Neeraj? Okay, Neeraj? Oh, yeah.
Okay, a couple of points. First, the issue of cash transfer. I think this is actually the prerogative of governments to consider such a policy. And there are both pros and cons to this kind of policy. But as a financial institution, the bank has supported many initiatives in terms of social protection. For example, 2 years back, the bank had come up with a COVID relief facility, which actually provided a large amount of funding to our regional member countries. And a large part of this facility was actually used for cash transfers to affected communities as well as private sector industries to ensure that they can continue to sustain employment. And similarly, the $1.5 billion emergency food production facility that I mentioned has also been largely used to provide subsidy to farmers, so that they can continue to avail the quality fertilizer and seeds even after a significant amount of inflation that has happened because of the war. So bank does play its role in terms of social protection, but of course as a institution that can provide comparative support to our regional member countries. Then coming to the second question of the implementation gap, and there again I would like to say that bank is an investment-led institution. So we do not make policies in isolation, and all the policy discussions that we have with the governments, and this is where I was talking about the Dakar conference, where we are trying to set up these compacts. So we are going to bring the government, the ministers of agriculture, industry, finance, along with private sector, along with development partners on one platform to identify and ensure that we have the political will that supports our investment plan that we agree. And then the bank, along with other development partners, will ensure that there is funding provided to implement that investment plan. So this is where we are very target oriented, and this ensures that the implementation gap is minimized, and a bank through its mechanisms and systems ensure that there is effective monitoring in place to measure the impact. So this is why our approach is quite different from policy oriented institutions. And same happens for governance. So wherever the bank is involved, we are doing policy-based interventions to ensure that the governance frameworks are strengthened in our member countries, and we have specific policy reform triggers that ensure that that will lead to the future economic growth in these countries. Then just a viewpoint in terms of growth versus justice. I think there are no guarantees that growth will bring justice, but this is where I think there needs to be checks and balances in the system, and all stakeholders need to play their role effectively. Like if we talk about democratic system, then the accountability is with the people, and if they don't hold their governments accountable, then they have to suffer, and that's what we see time and again. But what growth, and again, the role of private sector versus public sector, the data and history has proven that governments are very poor at creating growth. So private sector brings in the implementation efficiency, and that's what creates growth. The government has to provide the right environment, but governments have been very effective in ensuring transfers. So that's the role which governments have to play. So once the growth creates resources, then government should act to ensure that the vulnerable communities are protected and given enough benefits of transfer and protection. So everybody has to play their role so that the growth and justice can go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. Cash transfer is context specific. Someone will ask, what's the cash transfer for? If the cash transfer is for food, then you're probably better off investing in the capability to reduce some post-harvest loss, investing in all the tools that it takes for better management. So the bank has a strong priority in terms of human capital development. Human capital development comes in different forms. It could be jobs for youth, which is a flagship under Feed Africa. It could be capacity and skills development. Almost all our programs are actually about capacity. So why do we build capacity? Because it enhances your ability to do things differently and better, and you have options. If you don't have the capacity, then you don't have options. If you don't have options, you're more vulnerable. So building resilience is really about options. When you have more options, you're more resilient. So investing in people is the best. Investing in minds and brains is the best. And I think that's why TBTI has been continuing to do this sort of engagement with all of us. Now, the blue economy. Prateep, let's have this conversation. The blue economy is not new. It's not. Actually, before the blue economy, there has been many other frameworks, integrated coastal zone management. There's a whole lot of them. But I think what is unique with the blue economy for some of us is the fact that it is the future we want. It was embedded within a political framework that talks about the future we want. So now we can define what that is. And I think that's why we were saying, if we define and say we want our fisheries for nutrition, then we can work towards that. So when we develop blue economy programs, we have an analytical framework which takes into consideration multi-sectorial design. So there's a strategy, there's an implementation framework, there is a platform for incubation, there is a platform for resource mobilization, there are investment plans for individual sectors as well as integrated sectors. I think the best example I can give you will be for small island developing states, let's say for Cabo Verde. The bank supported Cabo Verde in its path. And today, I will tell you what, Cabo Verde is #1 when it comes to the Blue Charter. If you don't know much about Cabo Verde, Google it, they will tell you they have developed over a few years, they're able to develop a Blue Charter that cuts across all the elements, high stakeholder engagement, and now they have used the Blue Charter to look at investments in different sectors from shipping, maritime connectivity, fisheries, as well as other aspects of the blue economy. And finally, I can use the example of Seychelles. Why am I using small island developing states? Because they have more utility for their ocean economies more than anybody else. We have seen how difficult it is, and again, talking about governance, how wicked it is to have transboundary cooperation. The reason why we had BCC today having this conversation was because they have been one of the few to have a large marine ecosystem governance structure, and today they are delivering. So it's possible if you have the right framework. It doesn't stop there. You can learn a lot from BCC. What will BCC tell you? They took the time to engage at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level, and they're able to seek and finance their programs. Actually, BCC had a lot of financing from UNDP and GEF. So financing comes in handy as well. Now, my final point is about guidelines and implementation framework. Yes, you might argue that there are quite a lot of them, but you can also argue that they take different forms. When you develop a strategy and then you want to implement it, it comes with a whole lot of triggers. It comes with a whole lot of coordination. It comes with a whole lot of resource mobilization that is often not there. So we've been having this conversation at the AU-IBAR level. We've been having this conversation at Nepal. That's why we have the industrialization program with Nepal, for instance, in Niger. All of these platforms are to engage stakeholders, civil society groups, private sector, the banks, development partners, and for them to be able to play their part. So that said, it's not in silos. We often talk about ecosystem-based management. No, ecosystem-based management is still around. At the bank, we have our triggers for environmental and social safeguards. Colleagues, please endeavor to read some of these documents. ISS, Integrated Social Safeguards. You see all the necessary biodiversity issues around pollution, issues around displacement. All of those are catered for in banks operations. And the idea is that we want to empower countries to be able to do so by themselves, even though they're not having financing from a third party. So that said, I think there might be more opportunities during the reception to continue with this, but for now, I pass back the mic to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The last one, I left the minister because where I come from, when a policy maker speaks, that's policy, right? And coming back to the theme of the conference, leading by example, here we were trying to come up with demonstrating excellence in policy leadership. So I'm going to give Minister a chance to wrap it up for us. Minister.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the chance once again to talk about all of the effort we are putting in place in Madagascar. I think and I do believe that we have all of the existing tools when we talk about policy. Just because we can just easily refer to the SDGs, and then in Africa we have the AU Agenda 2063, for example. We have the PFRS. We also have the Malabo Declaration. We also have the Blue Economy Development Strategy for the AU. So in Madagascar, we referred to all of these existing tools. And I think that Madagascar is part of the very few countries in Africa that now have let's say, a document to, let's say, well frame the development of the blue economy in its territory. So our advantage is that we were trying to put in place, to elaborate the strategy, and then at the same time to put in place infrastructures. So we put in place infrastructures such as like a cold storage, such as like a process unit. We developed the aquaculture as it has been recommended by the FAO. Since FAO always said since 2018, if I'm not wrong, that the future of the global fishery is aquaculture. So that's why in Madagascar, we developed the seaweed farming. We developed the sea cucumber farming. And just recently, we started the crab fattening, and soon we'll be launching a crab farming. And of course, the fish farming has been promoted. So in less than 1 year, I'm sorry, we have seen that there is an advancement of the sector. There is a transformation of the sector that everyone can witness. And that is not only the work of the government, that is the work of all of the stakeholders that I have just mentioned during my first intervention. So the government is just there to put in place the tools and then to coordinate the implementation of the strategy. We also now have the national development strategy for aquaculture. And for the SSF, only for the SSF, now we are on the way with the support of the FAO, putting in place the national plan of action to implement the SSF. So that is, I think, a big support for us to boost the SSF at national level. And we are not alone, just because I know that there are some other countries in Africa as well that are implementing the same thing that what we are doing in Madagascar. So please, once again, come and visit us, come and let's say talk. There are a lot of people that can witness here. So I think that once again, together, we will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Together possible, as WWF say, and it looks like together it's who we are. Thank you very much. A round of applause to my panel, our panel. Don't forget, Infinity Fish. Thank you very much. Announcement.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ahmed and Maseke. You did a great job. And I didn't want to cut this because I think it was a very important conversation. And we would be continuing with this along the same line that the minister just said. Tomorrow's session is about climate-friendly food system. So we're going to be talking a lot about what small-scale fisheries can offer for that. And then a little bit of follow-up actually on the plenary about the social and business innovation. So let's keep our thinking hat on. Let's continue to be engaged. And there's now an opportunity to do that in a very relaxed way because the party is about to begin, right? So the reception is happening now in the brasserie. We are the first guests, so you haven't missed anything yet, unless other people who are not in this room are already eating all our food. Let's hope not, okay? So it's there where you had lunch, so just let's continue the conversation there, and please be back here for tomorrow plenary at 8:30 in the morning. Thank you, everybody. Congratulations.